Hello and welcome to another session of Mindful Data Mine. In today's session, we will be talking about how we can connect to a database using SAS. In SAS, whenever we try to connect to a database, we use pass-through connection. A pass-through connection can be either implicit or explicit. So when we say implicit, it is something which is done at the backend by SAS itself. Okay, we just need to write the normal queries which we have seen till now. Okay, and at the backend, SAS will convert it and then it will fetch the data from database. And the second one is explicit. Explicit means we need to write the queries on our own, which is specific to a database. When I say specific to a database, then in general, a DB2 function, DB2 is a database. The functions which are available in DB2 might not be available in SQL and vice versa. So that's why when we talk about explicit queries, then it will be a DB specific query or a database specific query. So without wasting any further time, let's start with the practical. So before we want to connect to any database, the first and foremost thing that we need to check is, am I eligible to connect to a database? Or if I'm eligible, which all database I can connect to? Since I'm using SAS Online Demand for Academics, which is available free and is provided by SAS directly. So first we will check which all the database I have access to, and then we'll move forward. To check all the available packages, we use proc set init and click on run. Now it will show us all the available packages until which date they are available. Okay, so SAS access interface to PC file. This is one. I can access MySQL, and if you see, I have access to PostgreSQL. Since this is a free version, so there might be a possibility that some of the database might not work perfectly. For this tutorial or for this session, I am working on PostgreSQL. Okay, and I am using this website which is known as UI Bakery. In this, we have a public database available. So we have database like booking website database, car dealer database, pet care clinic database, task, website, and e-commerce database. I'll be using e-commerce database. Now to connect to a database, we need the database credentials as well. These are the credentials available for e-commerce database. We have the server detail, port, username, password, database, which is required to connect to any database. Okay, now we will move on to our SAS Studio and we'll start with the explicit pass-through connection in SAS. Okay, now to write a explicit connection in SAS, we use procSQL. Inside procSQL, first we try to connect to the database. For that, we need to write connect to, then the database name, that is Postgre. Then if we want, we can pass a alias. I'll use x1 here, and in the bracket, we need to pass the server detail. So I'll first write server. Now I'll copy the host from here. Next is port. Port is 5432. Next is user for username. This is the username. Then we have password. This is the password. And finally, we have database name. Now, once this is done, the next thing is we need to write the query to fetch the data. So in this case, what I want to do is I want to fetch data from the database and create a table in my work library, that is into SAS. For this, what I'll do is I'll write create table. I'll use test underscore lib, or maybe test underscore SQL, as select asterisk from connection to x1. When I say connection to x1, I'm talking about connection to PostgreSQL, and in the bracket I need to pass the query that I need to fetch the data from the database. So here I'll write select asterisk from orders, because orders is one of the table available in e-commerce website. Okay, and in the end we need to disconnect from the database. For that we use disconnect from x1, and x1 is nothing but the Postgres. Now this is the general syntax which we use to write an explicit pass-through connection in SAS. Let's run it and see the results. So we have 329 rows and 7 columns in this database. If I go to log, then it took 4.54 seconds. User CPU time was 0.01 second. System CPU time was 00 seconds. In this way, we can write a explicit pass-through connection in SAS. Now, to create an implicit pass-through connection in SAS, we use libname statement. When we use libname statement, then we need to pass the same parameters, that is server detail, port, password, username, and database. Okay, and in the backend, SAS connects to the server by creating its own query, which will be optimized, and then it will be passed to database. So what we'll do is we'll use libname. I'll write PG here for Postgres, followed by the database details. So I've passed the Postgres database, and these are my server details. Okay, I've just copy pasted them because we need the same details. And when I now try to run it, this should create a new library named as PG. Okay, so the library has been created using Postgres, and this should be visible here. If you see PG, then we have these tables available, and out of these we are fetching data from orders. Okay, now if I want, I can use procSQL like we used to do earlier. Okay, I'll use create table, let's say test lib this time, as select asterisk from pg dot orders. Okay, now if I run it, it will create a new data set, okay, which will give me the same results. total rows 329, total columns 7. Okay, and if I see the log, it will say 1.65 seconds taken, zero point 0.01 seconds is the user CPU time, and system CPU time is 00. Now, what is the requirement of having an implicit connection when we have explicit or vice versa? Okay, so when we talk about implicit, SAS create the optimized query which is related to that particular database and then pass it. When we say optimized, so when a user write a query, it might be possible that the query is lengthy and might be consuming more resources. Okay, but when SAS write it, SAS will use the optimized version. This is one of the thing. Adding further to it, when we talk about explicit query, the issue with explicit query is that you should know which particular database you are fetching data from and what are the functions of that particular database. Now, someday if you want to fetch a data from DB2, okay, and maybe after a year or two, your organization says, okay, we are switching from DB2 to maybe SQL Server, then in that case, you will need to rewrite your queries using the functions which are available in SQL Server. But when you talk about implicit, in that case, you need not to do anything because it will be taken care of by SAS directly. All you need to do is you just need to pass the SQL server here followed by the parameters of that server. That's it. Okay, that's where the difference lies between the two. Now the third and the major difference lies in the processing time. Okay, for that what I'll do is simply I'll run the two queries side by side, okay, and see the results. Now if you see, this is my pass-through query implicit. Okay, real time is 1.83 seconds, CPU time 00, system time is zero point 0.1 second. If I check my explicit query, it says real time is 4.20 second, user CPU time is 0.01 second, system CPU time is 00 second. Okay, and the step count is 81. Here, step count is 82. Now, from the initial analysis, you can simply say that user CPU time is 0.01 second and system CPU time is 0.01 second here in this case. But if you go here, you will see it's just opposite. Okay, that means if it is consuming less system CPU time, this one is faster. That is the explicit query. Okay, and if I run this for the second time, the values might change. Okay, there might be a possibility you will feel like, okay, my implicit query is running faster than explicit query. Okay, again, it gives me CPU time as 0.01 for system and for user it's 00. Here it's 00 for both. Okay, the parameter keeps on changing. But as soon as the complexity increases, you will see a clear difference between the two codes, that is explicit and implicit. So let's try to increase the complexity. Okay, what I'll do is I'll try to join few tables with this. Okay, maybe what I'll do is I'll take data from customer. Now we have customer numbers here. Then I have this order. Okay, we'll check for the relationship between the two. So we have this order number here and customer number. That means we can join the two tables. And with orders, we have order details. So most probably orders and order detail will have some relation in between them. So order number will be joined with order number in the order details to so that we can join the three tables. Okay, now if I talk about payments, there should be a link between order and payment also. So we have customer number here. So with customers, we can link customer number. And finally, in the orders, we have product code as well. So this might be linked to product. And we have this product line as well. Okay, so there should be a link between product and product line as well. So we have product line here. What we'll try to do is we'll try to join all these tables and see if we get a difference between the two queries based on time. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll simply use, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and this is the sixth one. So we have six tables available. I'll quickly write a dot asterisk, comma b dot asterisk, comma c dot asterisk, d dot asterisk, e dot asterisk, and f dot asterisk. From we have customers A, left join orders B on A dot customer number equals to B dot customer number, then we have customer number here also, and then we have order number. Okay, so I'll quickly copy this and pass it here. Order details, and here I'll use order number. Okay, after this we have payments. Now payments, if I remember correctly, it was linked to customer. Payments. Then after payments we have product, which is linked to order or order details, if I'm not wrong. PRODUCTS, and we have product code here. Just linked to product code, yes. And product code was in C. C is linked to E. And last table is we have this product details. Sorry, product lines. Here we have product line. Okay, so this is our first query. I'll just try to run it to check if I missed anything. And if this is working fine, then we'll copy paste in the other one. We are getting one error here. Order details does not exist. So let's check the name again. ORDER It's order detail, not orders detail. Okay, now I believe the query is running fine. So we are getting the data here. I'll close these dataset because they are not required anymore. And what I'll do is I'll quickly copy the same code in the other one. Okay, and I'll use PG here. PG dot, because this time we are doing it implicitly. Okay, so it will be PG dot customer, PG dot order, PG dot order details, PG dot payments, PG dot products, and PG dot product lines. Now if I'll run both the queries at the same time, let's see what's the difference between two. I believe we got the error in one of the, because I forgot to add a semicolon here. So we need to add semicolon in the implicit one to tell SAS, okay, our this query is completed. Okay, now both the queries are running, and I believe for the first one, the data, we got the data as well. Okay, so we got same results. Okay, if you see, we are getting 37 columns here, and in this case, we are getting 42. The reason is there are few columns which are joined, okay, because we have used customer number and joining it with the other table's customer number. That's how we are getting two customer number here, which is handled by the database itself. But in our case, when we used the implicit query, SAS handle it on, okay, that's why it has sent an optimized version of the SQL code. That's how we are getting only 37 columns instead of 42, because that's an optimized query. I've written simply select asterisk from all the tables, but SAS knows, okay, there are few columns which are repetitive. If I'll open the log as well, you will see where your product line already exists. Okay, we are getting this founding, but this is only applicable to implicit one, not the explicit one. Now we'll talk about the time taken by the two queries. You have seen when we say optimized, that's how it is getting optimized at the backend and then it is getting passed. Okay, you have seen the difference, a visible difference in terms of number of columns. Okay, now if you see the time here, what I'll do is I'll copy paste this time from maybe step count, okay, and put it in a notepad. So this one is my implicit, and I'll again go up and copy the second timings. This is my explicit. Okay, so if you see real time, it took 7.28 seconds. And if I talk about implicit, it took 8.467 seconds. Similarly, for user CPU time, my explicit took 0.28 second and my implicit took 0.25 seconds. If I talk about system CPU time, then my explicit took 0.10 second and my implicit query took 0.09 seconds. But the overall time was increased. If I talk about number of steps, then here it took 14 and in this case it took 15. If I try to run it for one more time, Now let's see if we are getting the same results in terms of time. So again, this is my implicit. I'll put it here, and this is my explicit. I'll put it here. Okay, let's compare the two time. This time it took 8.62 seconds, and this one take, this is the explicit one, it took 7.23 seconds. User CPU time for explicit was 0.27 second. It's matching exactly, that is 0.27 second. System CPU time taken by explicit is 0.10 seconds, whereas system CPU time taken by implicit is 0.9 seconds. Okay, if you try to infer these results, again you will say, okay, maybe the implicit one is better with explicit, but if you try to increase the complexity, okay, by increasing the complexity at a particular time, you will realize that the explicit queries which we write are specific to a database that are faster, because when you talk about implicit, it takes few more steps in extracting the data from the database. So if you are writing an optimized query from your end, okay, and then if you try to extract the data using explicit query, and if you have the same implicit query, you will realize that the data or the time taken by the explicit is less compared to what it took from implicit, because it has a step overhead. That means it takes few more steps, because first it will read the data, sorry, read your query, convert it into SQL, then pass it to the database. Once database will fetch the result, then it will take it back and create a data set. But in case of explicit query, it is directly passing the data, sorry, passing the SQL query to the database, getting the data and giving us the data set. Okay, so that's where the difference lies. Just to summarize everything, in SQL, we have implicit and explicit pass-through. Implicit pass-through is something in which SAS will convert your code into a SQL query for that particular database. The query which will be converted will be an optimized query. Okay. Whereas in case of explicit query, you need to keep in mind that which particular database you are connecting to, what functions it will support. Okay. And based on that, you need to write the queries. This is where the explicit queries lag, because you need to know the database details, underlining functions. So in case in future, if your company or organization plans to migrate from one database to another, in that case, you need to rewrite the complete code SQL query. But this is a functionality, or you can say a feature. In this term, implicit query is better, because here SAS will take care of that for you. You need not to write the query again. You just need to update the parameters. When we talk about the time, okay, then the time of explicit query can be reduced. Okay, it can be less than implicit, because one thing is the step overhead, and the second thing is it depends upon the complexity of the query. So if you are writing a optimized complex code, okay, using explicit SQL query, okay, in that case you will realize the time is less in case of explicit query, whereas if you have a optimized implicit query, the time will increase because of the step overhead. So this is all about implicit and explicit queries using pass-through in SAS. Please let me know in comment section if you have any doubt or any queries related to pass-through connection in SAS. I'll see you in the next session. Thank you.